Letter 34 of Young Americans Abroad, or Vacation in Europe. Travels in England, France, Holland, Belgium, Prussia, and Switzerland. Edited by J. O. Choules. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter 34 Antwerp. Dear Charley, in company still with our friends from Bristol on a wedding tour, we took the rail for Antwerp. The arrangements of the railroad in Belgium seem to me as perfect as they can be made. All is order, civility, and comfort. On starting for this place, we had the curiosity to inquire as to the number of passengers, and found 13 first class, 71 second class, and 103 third class. The road we took lay through a level country, but cultivated to a great degree, and the produce was chiefly clover, beans, potatoes, grain, and turnips. On leaving Brussels, we noticed the fine botanical gardens on our right, and the Allée Verte, a noble avenue of trees, which reaches to Laeken, a pretty village, dating as far back as the 7th century, and containing a fine palace, where Leopold frequently resides. Napoleon once occupied this palace, and here it is said that he planned his Russian campaign. The park is spacious, and the village has a celebrated cemetery, and here Madame Malibran reposes. The first stopping place is at about 6 miles from Brussels, at Vilvoorde, a very ancient town, having a population of not quite 3,000. It is known in history as Vilvoordum, and was a place of some consequence in 760. It was here that Tyndale, who was the first translator of the New Testament into English, suffered martyrdom in 1536, being burnt as a heretic. The Testament was a 12-month edition. It was published in 1526, and probably was printed at Antwerp, where he then resided. 1,500 copies were printed, and they were mostly bought up by Bishop Tonsel and destroyed. The only copy known to exist is in the library of the Baptist College at Bristol. This copy belonged to Lord Oxford, and he valued the acquisition so highly that he settled £20 a year upon the person who obtained it for him. Both Tyndale's assistants in this great work, Frith and Roy, suffered martyrdom before his death. I am sorry to find by history that Sir Thomas More employed one Phillips to go over to Antwerp and decoy Tyndale into the hands of the Emperor. The last words of the martyr were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." Sir Thomas More was a bitter persecutor, and he was recompensed in his own ways. Not far from Vilvoorde are the remains of the Château of Rubens, and in the same vicinity is the house where Teniers is said to have lived. Mechlin or Malines is a fine-looking town, with 25,000 inhabitants, and it is spelt by early writers ways without number. The railroad just touches on its skirts, and of course we could only look at it. Its cathedral church loomed up, and we longed to see its interior, where Van Dyck's greatest picture, the Crucifixion, is found in the altar. The tower shows well at a distance. The other churches have some pictures of great merit, by Rubens. After passing Mechlin we saw at our right a large town, lying perhaps 2 miles off, and then a still smaller one on the left, and a fine old castle which looked in good preservation. The road led us through some fine country residences, and just before entering Antwerp we passed Berchem, a sweet little village. And I would not omit to say that the small place called Viaudeux, before we came to Berchem, is famous for being one of the last places where heathenism retained its hold in this part of Europe, and here was formerly an idol. Antwerp, or as the French write it, Anvers, is a noble city on the river Scheldt, and is about 27 miles from Brussels. The population is rather more than 80,000. The city is laid out in the shape of a bow, and the river forms the string. The river here is 190 yards wide. The tide rises about 15 feet. This place is of very ancient origin, and its legends are mixed up with the fabulous. Early in the 16th century it was an important town. It was fortified, and became one of the chief places of trade for the north of Europe. In 1520 the population was over 200,000. 500 vessels daily came into and left the port, and 2,000 others were always lying in the river and basins of the port. The death blow to this place was the Treaty of Münster, which stipulated that every vessel entering the Scheldt should discharge her cargo in Holland, so that it had to be conveyed to Antwerp by land. The abolition of the Spanish power was severely felt at Antwerp. You know, I suppose, that this is regarded as one of the strongest fortifications in Europe, and has been the scene of repeated sieges. The last and most celebrated one was in 1832, when it was captured by the French, after a brave defence of 2 months. You cannot easily fancy what a charming old city this is, but I shall try to give you some account of it and our employments here. We put up at the Hotel St. Antoine, in the Place Verte, nearly opposite the cathedral, and it certainly is one of the best houses we have seen anywhere. The courtyard is spacious, and has fine orange trees around it. Our rooms are very elegant, and on the first floor. The coffee room is admirably attended, and the table d'hôte is the best we have yet sat down to. A large part of our anticipated pleasure arose from the fact that here are the great works of Rubens, and in the city of Rubens, Van Dyck, Teniers, Jordaens, and Quentin Matisse, we felt that we could not be disappointed. In the Place Verte we find a colossal statue of Rubens by Giefs, and passing on a few steps, at the corner we come to the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which is so celebrated all over Europe as one of the grandest specimens of the Gothic order of architecture. There is much dispute as to the exact date of this church, but the evidence is in favor of 1422, and it is known to have been finished in 1518. This church is 466 feet high, 500 feet long, and 250 wide. The nave is thought to be the most superb in Europe, and the side naves are double, forming 230 arches, supported by 125 magnificent pillars, and some of these are 27 feet in circumference. Here Philip II, in 1555, held a chapter of the Golden Fleece, at which 19 knights and 9 sovereign princes were present. In 1559 Paul IV made this church a cathedral, but in 1812 Pius VII issued a bull by which it was made dependent on the diocese of Malines. The effect of the evening sun upon the painted windows is the production of a glory which no pen can describe. Charles V was once an actor here, for he stood godfather at the baptism of the great bell. The pulpit is carved work and done by Verbruggen. It represents the 4 quarters of the world, and though elaborate, is not as beautiful as the one in St. Gudule, at Brussels. The glory of the church is the breathing scroll of Rubens, so often seen upon the walls of its solemn aisles. Here is Rubens's great picture, The Descent from the Cross. To this picture pilgrimages have been made by all the lovers of art from other lands, and all concede the grandeur of idea and the simplicity of the style. There is quite a story about this picture, in which Rubens and the crossbowmen of Antwerp both figure, but which I have no time to tell you at present. Nearly opposite is the elevation of the cross. The Saviour's face and figure are not to be forgotten by any one who carefully gazes on this canvas. Both these pictures were carried off by the French, and also the Assumption of the Virgin, which is the high altar-piece, and were restored by the allied sovereigns in 1815. This last named picture is said to have been executed in 16 days, and his pay was 100 florins a day. I like it exceedingly, and the figure of the picture is more spiritual than any other I have seen of the Virgin. Its date is 1642. I advise you to read Sir Joshua Reynolds's Lectures, where you will find a critical description of these immortal pictures. The steeple or tower is regarded as unrivalled, and is one of the highest in the world. It is 466 feet high, and from the top we could see Brussels, Ghent, Malines, Leuven, and Flushing, and the course of the Scheldt lies beautifully marked out. I hardly dare tell you how many bells there are. Our valet said 99, one local book of facts says 88, but I suppose there are 80 or 90, and every 15 minutes they do chime the sweetest music. Charles V wished the exquisite tower could be kept from harm in a glass case. The tracery of this tower is like delicate lacework, and no one can imagine half its beauty. After we came down, we examined, at the base, the epitaph of Quentin Matisse, once a blacksmith, and then, under the force of the tender passion, he became a painter. The ironwork over the pump and well, outside the church, is his handiwork. All around the cathedral are the fine